Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Conversations for Research Rockstars. I'm Kathryn Korostoff, your host, and I'm very happy to introduce a topic today about ethnographic research. Specifically, if you want to do ethnographic research, one of the things that can be the most intimidating is figuring out how to find qualified people to recruit for it. So today, what I'll be talking about is how to make sure you have the best options available for finding and qualifying people to participate in your ethnographic research studies. So one of the things that comes up is needing to think really precisely about, for our given project where we want to recommend ethnography, are we recruiting individuals or are we recruiting groups? Now, the most common scenario is recruiting individuals. So most of us are doing commercial research. We're doing research for CPG brands or financial services brands or technology companies, consumer electronics, and so forth. And so we have to define who we want to participate. And we can get really super precise. And this can be important because with ethnographic research, you're typically not doing really large sample sizes. You're not going to go recruit 100 people to participate in an ethnographic study. Or at least that would be extremely unusual. In commercial market research, usually we're doing 20, sometimes fewer, but 20, 25 ethnographic quote interviews or sessions at a time. And for those of you taking the course, you also know that we're very careful when we talk about ethnographic research that it includes both an observation phase as well as an interview phase. And so when we're thinking about that, we want to make sure, since we're not actually going to be talking to that many people and observing that many people, we want to think really precisely about what is going to qualify people for this project. And so, as with other types of research studies, we have to think very carefully about how we're going to qualify people. So age, education, gender are always obviously very common variables when we're doing any kind of recruiting, and that includes ethnographic research. With ethnographic research, we also do pay attention to geography. So if I'm only going to be doing, say, 20 data collections, as it were, in this particular study, if I'm only going to be collecting data from 20 participants, I really want to think carefully about their geography. In some product categories, I might be interested in people who live in, some people, maybe it's a mix of people who live in suburban, urban, and rural locations. Or maybe it's a mix of people by parts of the country. Maybe I'm going to travel for this study, or I'm working with another data collection partner who's, and we're both going to be doing out in the field collecting data. Maybe I'm doing East Coast, maybe they're doing West Coast, et cetera. But I need to think really carefully about whether or not geography is going to be important, and if so, how I want to define geography. Employment status and household income, of course, are often important attributes to consider. Hobbies and interests. Very often with ethnographic research, we're doing things that do have to do with behavior, because that's part of the beauty of ethnographic research, is getting to observe people doing things, either using specific products or doing other things. So hobbies and interests can often be a really great type of variable to use. Marital status of children, media behaviors can sometimes be something that we're recruiting for when we're recruiting people to do ethnographic research. And then these next two are very specific, but very common. In commercial market research, when we do ethnographic research, we often want to qualify people based on their owning a specific product. So for example, one study I was involved with, they had to have certain types of floor cleaning products in the home. It couldn't just be a canister vacuum cleaner and a mop. They had to have, specialized floor scrubber products and so forth, steam related products. And so for that study, we needed to recruit people that were already using that type of product. So you see a lot of that in ethnographic research recruiting, that you are looking for people who currently own a product. It might be your product, a competitor's product, or just a product from a category. You also might be recruiting people for having a specific behavior. In my floor cleaning example, for example, we wanted people who actually cleaned their own floors. So it couldn't be somebody else in the household who was cleaning the floor, and it couldn't be if they had a cleaning service, then we didn't want them in the research. We needed people who we were going to be observing, who are the people who are normally cleaning the floor in their houses. And so that was something that was really important to us. So owning a specific product or having a specific behavior is often something that we look for when we're recruiting individuals. Now, here's the thing that for some of you may be a new idea. And that's the idea that we may also be recruiting people based on belonging to a group. Sometimes for market research projects that use ethnography, we are actually interested in groups, not individuals. And a group could be a family group. It could be a group of people participating at an event. For example, years ago, I had the opportunity to be part of a really cool project on camping. And we actually recruited people in group, they had to be a part of a group of 3 or more people who were camping. And some of the recruiting we did was at state parks. Sometimes it was at beaches, sometimes it was more forest locations, et cetera. But we were recruiting people to observe the group behavior of camping. In that case, we wanted to see how groups set up their campsites, what products they were using, sort of the layout of the campsite. We wanted to observe their frustrations with camping. It was a really fascinating project. So in that case, we were not recruiting individuals, we were recruiting groups. And again, I have to think really precisely what kinds of group is going to be most useful for my research. For example, do I want to define the composition by distribution of ages, distribution of gender? That could be something that's important for a particular topic of interest. The history of the group. Do I want a group that's a new group or a group that's been around for a while? So obviously a family group would generally be a group with some longevity. Maybe it's a group of college friends who go camping together every summer. There are a lot of different ways that you might think about the history of a group. Work groups also can apply there. Relationships. For your specific study, you might want to say, I do want people who have close personal relationships within this group. Or you might say, for this particular study, I want it to be more people who don't have close personal relationships. So you can define that as well. You might also have some interest in defining the size of the groups, the stability of the group. So if this is a group that's been going on for a long time, like going back to my college friends group idea, then you might say, I want a group where, it's at least 5 people and at least 4 of them have been in the group since its inception. How stable do you want that group to be? And then, of course, just like with individuals, we want behaviors. So we might be doing a study where we want to observe how people are behaving, for example, at a sporting event, a particular type of sporting arena. And so we might be interested in groups that are tailgating or groups that are doing other things as a group at a sporting event. So these will hopefully give you some ideas to think about how you're going to define finding people, what's going to be the attributes, whether it's for individuals or groups that will really make this research effective. And don't start worrying yet about how you're going to find people. We're going to talk about that in a moment, but this is something that is an important starting point for this particular project. Do I really want individuals or do I really want groups? And by the way, this often comes up with family research. So for example, a study I was reading about recently that was about driving safety, what they were doing was they needed to actually, it was driving safety with teen drivers. Now you could have said, oh, they're going to recruit teen drivers, maybe get consent from the adult, from their guardians, their parents, et cetera. But actually what they wanted for this particular study was to understand all of the things that can contribute to safe driving behaviors. So they actually wanted to recruit the family. So it had to be the teen driver, their adults, their siblings, or whoever else was in the household to participate in the research. All right, so once we've thought really carefully about, are we doing research with individuals or research with groups? Now we have to talk about how to find people. And this is where I see a lot of market researchers get nervous about the viability of doing true in-person ethnographic research, because it can feel like a big ask, recruiting people to participate, explaining that there's going to be an observation period and an interview afterwards. So the whole thing might take 2 hours, 3 hours in some cases, even longer. And so it can feel like a big ask. And so it can be a little concerning if you haven't done it before, but there are some known ways of finding qualified participants. Now, first of all, in market research, when we hear the phrase convenience sampling, usually we think, oh, that's terrible. Convenience sampling is always going to be biased and low end, et cetera. But actually in ethnographic research, it may not be bad. because very often in ethnographic research, we are looking for depth. We're looking for an opportunity to observe people and then have a really great research interview at the end of after the observation to really peel the onion and even get clarity to be able to probe, et cetera. And so you need people who are really qualified and who are really authentic. So if your company or your client's company has a list of customers who participated in research in the past, maybe that's a good convenience source for you. Now, research purists might be saying, oh, but Kathryn, that sample is going to be biased. Now they know who we are. They've already participated in research from us. You know, if you were doing survey research, I would agree with you. But we're talking about ethnographic research. So if I've recently done other research where I have identified people who will do research for my company, and maybe I even know something about them, well, they're convenient, and that's a good thing in this case. Again, I'm not doing survey research. I'm not doing ethnography to figure out what % of people in my target market think our brand is being family friendly. That's not the purpose of ethnographic research. We're looking for discovery. We're looking for depth. We really want to explore something. So use a convenient sample if it's people who are qualified for the project. Now, if you're doing on-site recruiting, which does sometimes happen with ethnographic research, we often will use sort of a randomization approach. Like, let's say you've been hired by a movie theater chain to do some observational research. You're doing some ethnographic research on site. And so you and a colleague maybe have a table, you know, or an area in the lobby to recruit people as they come in, to ask them if it would be okay for you to observe them during, in the food lobby or whatever it is that you are looking to observe, and then ask them a few follow-up questions. Now, in cases like that, you're there obviously with the permission of the host of the movie theater company or the shopping mall or whatever it is. So what you might be doing at that point is just deciding on how you're going to pick people randomly. You might use a random number generator on your cell phone. You might have another way of randomizing, but what you want to do is make sure it's random. If you don't make that decision with intent, what happens is that the people who are doing the on-site recruiting have a tendency to recruit people who are like them. So there's sort of this tendency to recruit people who are your own age and gender, ethnicity, similar clothing. Those things can actually come into play. So you want to make sure that you're not biasing yourself. So very often you will do some sort of randomization tactic to make sure that you are inviting, say, every fourth person, no matter what, or again, using some sort of random number generator, and counting off people in between. Sometimes we can also use reverse sampling. So reverse sampling is when we recruit people from social media, basically. So you put up some banner ads or invitations in groups that are related to the topics of interest. So maybe you are going to use banner ads to invite people to apply to potentially participate in a research study on kitchen appliances, whatever your topic is. And reverse sampling is a little bit unpredictable. Depending on what the topic is, it can be extremely efficient or extremely slow. Obviously, there are some topics that people want to talk about. So if you're doing reverse sampling and it's about fashion or food, there are a lot of things that people have as hobbies and interests, and they're going to engage. If you're doing reverse sampling and your banner ad is talking about a really boring product category, like, I don't know, experience with paving equipment, just something that might not be as exciting as fashion. No offense to our friends who work in the paving equipment industry. But you can, depending on the topic, actually do pretty well with using banner ads and social media invitations. Understand that, like anything else, when you do that kind of work, that repetition is important. Somebody might actually have to see your invitation a few times before they opt in. So it's definitely going to take repeat exposure. In any case, social media sampling, reverse sampling can be convenient and can be effective depending on your topic. And then, of course, there are specialty recruiters. There are companies that specialize in qualitative research recruiting, and you can find those types of companies listed on the various market research directories, like at the Insights Association directory, or over at Quirk's Marketing Research. They also have a directory of suppliers of various kinds, including specialty recruiters. You can also do something called snowball sampling. Snowball sampling is basically where you say, I'm going to talk to more people who look like this awesome recruit. So I just recruited George, and George is awesome. I can tell he's going to be great for this research. And I'm going to ask George, do you have any friends or colleagues who also enjoy camping at the beach or whatever it is? And we often actually find that that works very well, especially for very specific behaviors. So snowball sampling can be a great way to, again, find even more qualified participants. Once we find our sample source, then we have to think about how we're really going to do it. Very often in ethnographic research, we will have some sort of distribution quotas, like we want to make sure we have that mix of ages or household types. We might also use the process of elimination. Like if I am recruiting at a sports arena, I might say, for this research, I'm not going to recruit anybody who has children. I might also impose randomization. So I might say, okay, this is just going to be totally random. I want to make sure that I'm not going to be biased in how I'm selecting people. I want to make sure that I randomize it to make sure that I'm not skewing my data. And sometimes you look for maximum variation. That is, you might be looking at people who have maybe they initially responded to that social media ad. So let's say 50 people responded to that social media ad. You might want to look through and find the most diverse set of people from that sample and only invite them, so that you get maximum variation. So if that social media ad had something about kitchen appliances, you might say, okay, I'm going to make sure that I recruit at least 20% have owned their current kitchen appliances for at least 5 years, and at least 20% have owned them for at least 10 years. I might be looking for making sure that there's something different about the participants. In any case, when you are doing on-site recruiting, you do have to be careful. So whether you're doing online or on-site recruiting, just a couple last tips. When you are on-site, even though being on-site means that the sponsor is probably owning that property or has a partnership with that property, like a shopping mall or a movie theater, make sure you have an escort, like you have somebody from that company who might have a badge or a uniform, just so people know that you're legit. People can get very nervous, and you don't want to lose potentially good participants. And also, don't have too many people involved. So if you're recruiting people in the lobby of a movie theater, don't have 3 researchers reaching out to one person. That can feel like a gang effect, and we want to avoid that. And just make sure that you're sending out those signals that this is professional and polite and not aggressive. And when you are pre-recruiting through social media banners or other means, just remember you're going to have to over-recruit, because you will have dropouts. People will initially say, that sounds great, I'll do it. And then when the reality comes of being observed, they may drop out. So be sure you over-recruit. Anyway, I hope these tips have been helpful for you. If you have any questions, do let me know. Thanks. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Conversations for Research Rockstars. This video podcast series is available on YouTube, and if you prefer an audio-only version, please be sure to find us on your favorite podcasting platform. We hope you got value out of today's episode, and if you did, please be sure to review and subscribe. It helps us to reach more research rock stars like you.